From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power.
Live from the Democratic National Convention in Chicago to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
It's night one of the convention. The proceedings in the United Center set to begin just over 1 hour from now, with President Biden slated to give the headline speech tonight, just a month after leaving the race and passing the baton to Kamala Harris.
Harris coming into this convention week with momentum, leading Donald Trump by 4 points in a new national poll, while Trump plans a week of swing state counter-programming. We'll have more this hour with our signature political panel and Democratic strategist Kristen Hawn.
We'll also be joined ahead by Union leader Saunders before he speaks on the convention floor tonight, and by Frankie Miranda, president and CEO of the Hispanic Federation. Kaylee, we made it here. Thanks for joining us in Chicago as we get things together on Balance of Power. It's the Monday edition, which of course means just the beginning. Kaylee, shortly delegates are going to vote to approve a party platform, and then of course the big moment tonight will be Joe Biden. He's already been out on the stage to get a little bit of a walkthrough earlier with Jill Biden, and he'll be speaking in prime time tonight.
Indeed, he will. And then, of course, he will be leaving Chicago right after that, making way for his successor, the woman he endorsed to be the Democratic nominee in his stead, Kamala Harris. After this evening, it becomes her convention. It already was, Joe, but Biden is going to get his moment tonight.
That's true. The First Lady will speak as well, along with Hillary Clinton. And so the gavel will drop just moments from now, the 2024 Democratic National Convention, which brought us here to Chicago and set to take the stage tonight in the lead up. Of course, President Biden, also Gina Raimondo, Sean Fain, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jim Clyburn, Raphael Warnock, Hillary Clinton. Let's take a look more at what's happening over at the United Center now with Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, who's standing by at the forum. Tyler?
Yeah, hey, Joe, I'm here on the convention center floor. You can see the stage behind me. That's where President Biden will address the nation tonight. We're going to do a little walkthrough here so you can see what's happening right now. The choir just finished warming up on stage. Delegates are starting to stream in here, get their seats so that they can have a good view of the speeches tonight. Also, some lawmakers are already on the floor doing the rounds. We saw Congressman Jamie Raskin here earlier talking to reporters. And we know, as you mentioned, President Biden did a walkthrough earlier too, and when asked by reporters if he was ready to pass the torch, he said that he was. It's pretty remarkable to think that just weeks ago this was supposed to be President Biden's Democratic National Convention. It is a storied ending to months of campaigning and also President Biden's fourth run for the White House. We do know that he's going to be introduced by his daughter Ashley Biden, along with First Lady Jill Biden. You mentioned some of those other names there, including Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, New York Governor Kathy Hochul, and also Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We're going to be watching closely to see how tonight President Biden threads that needle between unifying the party but also cementing his legacy. We're expecting him to talk a lot about the accomplishments of his administration, touting some economic policies too, and how a potential President Kamala Harris could carry those on when he takes the stage tonight. He's not, though, staying long. I should note, Joe and Kaylee, he's heading out of Chicago later this evening.
All right, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall on the floor in the United Center. Thank you so much for joining us. And now joining us here around the table in our studio, just around the corner, Bloomberg's Shruti Singh and Mario Parker. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us. And it certainly is going to be a momentous week for the party as a whole, but it's a momentous night for the president. As Tyler was just talking about, having to thread this needle. Is this a legacy speech for the president he has been, or a campaign speech for the vice president who has served him for the last 3.5 years?
Well, President Biden is trying to have it both ways here. On the one hand, there's no doubt about it that this will be viewed as somewhat of a swan song, right? Given the fact that he's passing the torch essentially and then exiting stage left, quite literally, going on vacation to the West Coast, right? But at the same time, his aides insist that he will continue to be president. I mean, we've got a few issues going on in the world, geopolitical, Israel, Gaza, for example, et cetera. The last thing he wants to do is make himself more of a lame duck for the next 70-odd days.
We're going to talk, I'm sure, over the course of this hour about the many protesters expected in Chicago tonight who are here because of one issue. And that issue is developing today as we speak at this convention. Mario, what can you tell us about this breakthrough on a ceasefire? Benjamin Netanyahu has signed off on it. Hamas has not, and this feels really familiar.
This does. We've been here before a few times now, maybe a third time now. President Biden earlier a few days ago said this is the closest we've ever been. Again, holding out hope that we may get across the finish line this time. I do want to say, if this does happen during a convention week, what a boon it will be for the party, right? As a few blocks away from where we are right now, protesters are staging at Union Park in order to make a big display about this. So what happens if they do have a breakthrough right now?
Well, of course, it will come down to Hamas, and that is exactly what the Secretary of State Antony Blinken had to say about this when he announced the progress that had been made earlier today.
In a very constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu today, he confirmed to me that Israel accepts the bridging proposal, that he supports it. It's now incumbent on Hamas to do the same. And then the parties, with the help of the mediators, the United States, Egypt, and Qatar, have to come together and complete the process of reaching clear understandings about how they'll implement the commitments that they've made.
So until when, and that it actually isn't even a when, it's an if Hamas does the same, Shruti, we can probably still expect these protests to continue. Just how aggressive do you expect these protests could get in the city of Chicago when everyone is reminding us of 1968?
Well, that's an unknown, and I think everyone is hoping for the best. But if there isn't a protest, if there aren't all the things that people have been preparing for here in Chicago, I think this will be one of those things where they say, well, this is more like 1996 and not like 1968, because Chicago has had two very significant Democratic conventions here. 1968 clearly made history because of all the tumultuous nature of the protests and the youth coming out into the streets. 1996 is something that Democrats really point to as a very successful convention. So I think they're trying to figure out which one it's going to be. And if there aren't any type of problems, then they're going to say, look, we had a repeat of 1996.
There's no arms embargo on Israel in the party platform that they're going to be voting on a short time from now. This was a demand by the protesters. So presumably, even if there's ceasefire news tonight, they're still going to be marching. Kaylee, I think to your point, the coalition to march on the DNC includes about 200 groups rallying in support of Gaza. How large is this going to be?
I mean, I think it could be tens of thousands. It could be a lot smaller. But just let's also remember that this isn't the only issue that people are bringing to Chicago. I think reproductive rights, labor rights are also issues that people are going to be marching on. So this is a very significant development, obviously. But let's also not forget some of the other national issues that are going to be coming to the fore here in the city.
Well, of course, one of those national issues is the economy. This also happens to be an issue that she's traditionally, and Biden before her, performed more poorly on in polling than Donald Trump has. And this convention is coming in the aftermath of her outlining of her economic policy agenda in North Carolina last week. We spoke about that agenda earlier today with Democratic Senator LaFonza Butler of California, and here's what she had to say about it.
Yes, she has put forth an ambitious, I believe, practical approach that is about how do we listen to what the American people need from government and actually make plans to act. Are the plans going to turn out exactly the way that that she put forth in her proposal in North Carolina? This is all going to be a process. She said herself what she wants to do is bring stakeholders together.
So the senator there, Mario, describing it as practical. Others have criticized some of these policies as potentially inflationary. Donald Trump is now calling her comrade Kamala, suggesting some of her ideas look a lot like communism. Should we expect her to dig deeper into this or other policy areas this week to potentially walk anything back? Or is this going to be very broad strokes about the future of the country and freedom, as we've heard from her freedom?
Yeah, I think what you'll see is a lot of the broad strokes. One of the things that I'd like to key in on that the senator said was listen to the American people. know. What the Biden administration did for the last year and a half or so was defend its policies, right? And defending its policies on the campaign trail seemed to go, it was unheard by the voters. In some ways, it was viewed as insensitive even, right? Because you're telling the voters that, hey, I've got this great economic record, and then they're going to the grocery store with 25% prices. There was a disconnect. What you see Kamala Harris doing here, even with the policy, is essentially changing the message of the party, right? I hear you, I understand your pain. And maybe that's the hope for the Democrats, that breaks through with voters.
You know, it's interesting as we sit here in Chicago, there's a potential image makeover that could come with this convention. Donald Trump continues to compare the crime statistics in Chicago to what happens in Afghanistan. He said this again just a couple of days ago. This is a massive opportunity for the city to kind of change its image in the eyes of the American people. Can it do that at the same time as handling all the complications we've been talking about?
I mean, I don't know if it has a choice. I think all those things come at the city, the mayor, and the city council and the residents here. What I will say is that I've been covering Chicago and the region for a really long time, and I think this is an area where, whether it's the city of Chicago or the state of Illinois, it is an area where Republicans like to point out that here is a place that fiscally or crime-wise, that Democrats rule, and they've gotten it wrong. So this is an example that they try to show, hoping to get votes, I think, in other parts of the country.
Yeah, well, certainly doing a lot for the local economy, Kaylee, as we've learned. We'll see what it does for the image as we wrap things up later this week in Chicago. Bloomberg's Shruti Singh, Mario Parker, we thank you so much for great reporting and a great conversation today on Balance of Power. It's day one, and coming up, we'll look at the support from unions for the Harris-Walz ticket. Lee Saunders, president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, joins us coming up live from outside the United Center here in Chicago. It's next on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The only thing those two guys knows about working people is how to work to take advantage of them. That's what they know about it. Every single chance they've gotten, they've waged war on workers and their ability to collectively bargain to take that away from them. All we're asking for is better wages, better benefits, better lives, and dignity in the work that we do.
That was Democratic Vice Presidential candidate Tim Walz speaking at an event last week with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, or AFSCME, which is part of the AFL-CIO. And joining us now live from the United Center here in Chicago as we broadcast live from the Democratic National Convention here on Bloomberg TV and radio is that union's president, Lee Saunders. Mr. Saunders, welcome to Bloomberg. Thank you so much for being with us. It's noteworthy that as you stand outside the convention center this evening, you are waiting to hear from President Biden, who has called himself the most union-friendly president in American history. How could a potential President Harris top him?
Well, I think she, number one, supported everything that the president did as far as the relief plan, as far as the infrastructure bill, as far as placing good qualified judges in the circuits across the country, and he tried to build upon the economy. Now, clearly there is more work to do, and I think that Kamala Harris understands that, and she wants to build upon the successes that President Biden and Kamala Harris have had, and we're supporting that. We're supporting that 100%. I came from a convention last week, as you stated. We had 4,000 delegates there, and we had Governor Walz talk about, number one, the fact that he is one of us. He's from a union. He was a teacher. He understands the issues that working people deal with every single day. Kamala understands those issues as well. She's a public servant. She was a public servant in California. So we relate to their experience, and they relate to our experiences. And we look forward to working with them. We look forward to them building upon the successes of the Biden administration, and we're going to continue to move forward.
Well, I've been hearing a lot, Lee, about organized labor on the Republican side of this campaign as well. At the RNC last month, the vice presidential nominee, Senator J.D. Vance, talked about this and had this to say about the campaign's effort to win over organized labor. Let's listen.
We need a leader who fights for the people who built this country. We need a leader who's not in the pocket of big business, but answers to the working man, union and non-union alike. A leader who won't sell out to multinational corporations, but will stand up for American companies and American industry.
Lee, you're going to be speaking to the delegates at this convention tonight. What's your response to the Trump-Vance ticket?
Well, let me just add to what J.D. Vance was saying. We need a leader. We need a leader that is going to support working families. They are not the leaders that will support working families. Let's be clear about that. They have not done it. Trump didn't do it when he was in the office. He is not doing it now. As a matter of fact, last week he talked about firing striking workers. That's nonsense. That's unbelievable. We need to have a president and a vice president who wants to sit down, broaden that table, work with unions, work with working families to deal with the issues that confront them every single day, whether it's putting food on the table, whether it's health care, whether it's retirement security, whether it's putting more money into public services across the country. They have done that over the past 4 years, and they're going to build on that record and do more.
Well, as you talk about the idea of putting food on the table, we do know that this election very much is about the economy and about the costs that everyday people, union workers or otherwise, are facing. There has been criticism among economists and those we follow here at Bloomberg, sir, about the economic policy proposals that Harris has put forward within the last week, suggesting that some of them may in fact be inflationary. Do you have any concerns about anything you've heard on her economy ideas thus far?
I think that she's putting forth ideas. Those ideas are going to have to be discussed. We're going to have to be talking to her about it. But she has a desire, a clear desire, to support working families across the country. And you just flesh out those ideas. And that's something that President Biden did as well. He talked with unions. He talked with our members. He talked with working families across the country. And he developed programs around those conversations that he had. Donald Trump has never talked directly to a working family, or he never cares. He doesn't care about the plight of working families across the country. He cares about big business. He cares about corporations who are taking advantage of working families. And we've got to deal with this, and we're dealing it in a way where we're mobilizing and educating and organizing our people across the country, and every single union is doing the same, and we're communicating with our members. We're communicating with our communities, and we're telling them that we have got a good start with the Biden administration, but there's still more work to do. And Kamala Harris will carry that torch along with Tim Walz.
Well, Lee, you're not the only one speaking tonight from organized labor. Shawn Fain from the UAW will be addressing the delegates as well. Donald Trump went to Michigan to speak to UAW members, knowing that about a third of them voted for Trump in 2016. What's your message to them? What don't they get?
Well, first of all, let's be clear that Donald Trump did not go to Detroit and spoke to UAW members. Those were not members he spoke to. Most of them were in a non-union plant. They brought those workers in, and he talked to them. The person that supported that strike was President Biden, where he went to the picket line, and he walked that picket line. As a matter of fact, I was there a couple of days later. He walked that picket line to show support for those workers and demanded that they have justice and respect on the job. He did that. The team of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden did that. Trump had nothing to do with that at all. Now, I just wanted to clarify that. Everything that Trump talks about is anti-worker, it's anti-union, and we've got to hold him accountable to that. Everything that has been done in this present administration has been to support working families, to support the unions that represent them, to support our communities across the country, to improve their lives every single day. Whether it's been lowering healthcare costs, whether it's been the infrastructure program, student loan reductions, taking away that burden from people that are covered under debt for so long. He has dealt with those kinds of issues, but there needs to be more done. Make no mistake about it, but they're on the right track. If you had a Donald Trump in office, he would take all of that away and he would move backwards.
All right, Lee Saunders, we appreciate your time this evening. He's president of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. He will be speaking tonight at this first night of the convention at the United Center. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, earlier today, we were also joined by Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger of Virginia, who was addressing Kamala Harris and specifically her foreign policy experience in our conversation earlier on TV and radio.
As vice president, she has had a seat in the room at every major decision, whether it was sharing initial intelligence related to our knowledge that the Russians were going to invade Ukraine, or anything across the board since that war began. She knows the reality and the dire consequences of each situation and what the American response needs to be and has been.
And as we hear more from other Democratic leaders this week about why they believe Harris is the best choice for the job, let's take a look at the Democratic strategy for this convention week. Kristen Hawn is with us now. She's Rokk Soultions Partner and a Democratic strategist. She's joining us live here in our Chicago studio. Great to see you, Kristen, as always. Of course, while this is a Harris convention week and we are hearing a lot about the vice president, tonight in many ways belongs to the current president, Joe Biden, who will be giving the headline speech. How difficult do you think this is going to be for him this evening? We saw him doing his walkthrough on the United Center floor. This has to be an emotional moment.
I mean, I think it probably is an emotional moment, and he's passing things over. But what he has said over and over again, democracy is more important than any one person's ambitions or what they want to do. So I think it's probably also a moment of pride, because he's passing this over. Democrats are very excited about our chances in November. We're excited about Kamala Harris, and I think that he has a lot to do with that, so he has a lot to be proud of. So I think there's probably mixed emotions, but that's a good one.
Well, bittersweet is the headline everywhere today. And I need to ask you about the bitter part of that. What's actually happening inside the party, this feud that is said to be simmering between Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi? What does that mean for the tone tonight, and how difficult this will be for him?
It's funny. I was actually sitting at lunch today with a bunch of people from across the party, people who work for Pelosi and people who work for Hakeem, and we were all talking about how funny it is that, not funny, but I mean, people are asking that exact question. When, we all come here, it's family. I've been working in, Democratic politics for 23 years. I don't know of a time when I felt more cohesive, that everybody's on board, everybody's there. And whatever happened to get us to this place, it's gone, y'all. I mean, the Democrats are excited from across the board. The progressives, the New Dems, the Blue Dogs, we're here. So, I think that there's more of the rumor mill, and it's not what I'm seeing.
But the Democrats you're talking about are the people who were always going to vote for Harris or Biden anyway, right? What this week could be about is also bringing more people in, attracting those independent voters or the Nikki Haley voters. How do Kamala Harris and the others, frankly, who are going to speak over the course of the next 4 nights do that this week?
I think you have to talk about, it's an interesting race because you have to talk about what people care about, which is the economy. It always is, right? It's healthcare, it's personal decisions, which includes the issue of abortion. That's a personal thing, that's a healthcare thing. But you're also running against a man who, as much as his staff wants him to talk about these issues, he gets sidetracked. He's like, I know they want me to talk about the economy, but I'm going to go ahead and lodge personal insults at my opponent. He can't stay on track. So it's almost like a dual thing. But we have to actually speak to these people who are like, okay, I can get on board with Kamala. I can get on board with Tim Walz. And I think that's why it's so important that you have the combination of the both of them.
This party platform that delegates are about to vote on, though, mentions Donald Trump's name 150 times. How much of this convention is going to be aimed at him versus reintroducing Kamala Harris to voters?
I think it's got to be mostly, reintroducing or, here's our candidate. It's going to be a positive convention. It's going to be something where we're trying to tell people what our vision is for the future. I would be surprised if people say his name too many times. We all know who we're running against. We're not saying we're going to win this. We're working hard, but I think it almost is like a twofer. Yeah.
It's great to have you with us here at the table.
Thank you.
Have a great convention. Kristen
you.
Hawn, of course, Rokk Soultions Partner and one of the most connected Democratic operatives we work with in Washington. Here on the road, coming up, more from the convention site and a look at how the Harris-Walz ticket is trying to resonate with Hispanic voters. Frankie Miranda, the president CEO of the Hispanic Federation, will join us next as part of our coverage here on day one of the DNC. It's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio, where we're live here in Chicago, day one of the Democratic National Convention. Voting about to begin as delegates make their way into the United Center that you're seeing right now on Bloomberg TV. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lines in Chicago. We're glad you're with us. One key demographic for the Harris campaign come November, Hispanic voters. Something we talk about a lot. A poll from Pew Research recently showing they favor the vice president over Donald Trump by 52 to 35%. Joining us here in Chicago, Frankie Miranda, president and CEO of the Hispanic Federation. It's great to see you at the table. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for
That's a
having me.
convincing lead. Do you worry about Democrats becoming complacent?
Well, as a nonprofit organization, nonpartisan, involved in civic engagement, for us, this is an incredible opportunity, because before we were engaging people that were not interested in having this conversation. But now, since this new announcement, people are interested. And we have seen that in our poll with the Hispanic Federation and Latino Victory, we have seen that more than 57% of people said that now they're interested in talking more about this race.
Mm-hmm. And is it just because it's a different candidate? Is it the way that Vice President talks about the issues? What do you attribute that to? What has changed?
Definitely there was a moment in this race that people were just feeling that the candidates were not representing them, that they were not talking about them. And this poll also demonstrates us that Latinos are interested in talking about the pocketbook issues. It's not about the inflation, it's about housing, it's the cost of living. So now that there is an opportunity for VP Harris to talk about these issues that she did this week, and now during this convention, she will be able to define even more. It seems that Latino voters know what the policies of new Trump administration will be, but they're still waiting to hear what the VP is going to be proposing as her policy agenda.
Well, and the Harris campaign is trying to fill in the blanks, at least in the initial stages of introducing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to the community earlier this month, releasing this ad to target Latino voters. Here's a taste.
When you're raised by an immigrant mother, you learn what's possible with determination.
And determination is how Kamala Harris
went from working in McDonald's to prosecutor,
state attorney general,
U.S. senator, and our vice president in only one generation.
A very personal approach. She's obviously not Donald Trump, I think, is the message from the campaign. How's it playing?
It is something that Latinos want to hear more about.
Yeah.
We asked a series of questions about who has the traits to become president, who can I trust, who is going to have a humane approach to everything. And absolutely, Kamala Harris, VP Harris, comes ahead of Donald Trump. And also, we asked about individual policy issues, such as reproductive rights, an approach, a humane approach to immigration, and VP Harris continues to be in front. Where is the opportunity? The opportunity is still that there is a portion of Latinos that still are unsure about these overall policy platforms. So that is the moment in which we need to start doing more work. The campaign needs to do more work in doing the culturally competent, linguistically competent approach to address these issues with our community.
Well, I want to go back to the issue you mentioned on immigration, a humane approach to immigration. Obviously, the border and her role at the beginning of this administration, overseeing that or taking charge of that issue has been a consistent attack line for Republicans. And Donald Trump himself, when Harris is getting ready to give her acceptance speech on Thursday night here in Chicago, will be at the border trying to draw a contrast on that issue. When it comes to issues of immigration and migration, what do Latino voters want to see from these candidates? What kind of policy is it that they would like to see pursued?
In this poll that we did, we know that overall, Latinos feel that Kamala Harris, VP Harris, will have a humane, just approach to immigration for those that are already here. When we're talking about the border, there's still questions about what exactly is going to be this policy, and they lean more towards Donald Trump in terms of who will be more effective at the border with border policy. So again, this is an opportunity this week for the Kamala Harris ticket to be able to define herself and this ticket on what is going to be this approach on the border.
Talk about the border. How about we talk about immigration policy? When it comes to the Harris campaign, the need for more legal immigration to help the workforce continuing to grow means what to Latino voters in contrast to build the wall?
Well, there has been a systematic defunding of the immigration system. Right. And what we need to make sure is that those people that are here that have been fueling our economy, we know that we still a competitive economy because of the influx of people, the new workers that have been added to the workforce. How are we going to expedite these work permits? How are we going to skill this workforce to the jobs of the future? This is a big concern for our community. And Latinos want a humane approach and something that actually makes sense, because as of right now, the piecemeal approach that is being happening and the refusal from Congress to tackle the issue of immigration has been very, very complicated for our community. We need not only a president, but we also need a Congress that is committed to provide humane approaches and make sense to this immigration system that right now we all know that is broken and is not working.
Well, I'm glad you raised that, because while we are focused very much on the presidential race here at the Democratic convention, there are down ballot races to consider as well. As you talk about a kind of reinvigoration and enthusiasm and interest in being involved in this election cycle that wasn't there before. Is that true of congressional races as well?
We see it all the way down through the ballot. And this is, again, an opportunity for groups like ours, community groups, that we're going to be doing all of these get out the vote, voter registration drives, to be able to have the opportunity to even speak to them about the importance not only of paying attention to the presidential election, but also all of these other positions that really make the difference in our life. So it's an education process. And right now, because of this enthusiasm, we have the door open to be able to talk about it. Before, we were not seeing that.
The Latino vote is, of course, not a monolith. Does the winning message address the nuances within the community?
I think that what we need to do is that we need to have a serious conversations with the campaign and really letting them know that talking to Latinos in Florida, Arizona, Chicago, New York, or California is going to be different. You need to tailor your message to these different communities. But at the same time, there are arching themes that our community wants to hear and that is important. And the best way to do that is to tackle these issues in conjunction with nonprofit organizations that are the trusted partners in communities. If I help you through the pandemic, if I help you through the economic crisis, if I help you with so many issues, these organizations are very well positioned to also fight misinformation and being a trusted source of information for our community. We know what many of the social media platforms are doing to combat misinformation in English. We still don't know exactly what they're doing in terms of Spanish. So that is why it is important to work with this army of organizations that are going to be the ones that are going to support you, the next president, in any policy measure, or going to be your critics. So it is important to start right now creating these, using this enthusiasm and be able to just talk to community.
Well, and it was great to talk to you today. We appreciate your time. That's Frankie Miranda. He's president and CEO of the Hispanic Federation, joining us live here in Chicago. And still ahead, we'll take a look across the aisle at how the Trump-Vance ticket is counter-programming the DNC this week. Our signature political panel, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzano, will weigh in next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We've had great success, as you know, politically and otherwise in Pennsylvania, and we expect to have it again. We're doing very well here. Thank you very much. With your vote, we will unleash explosive economic growth and vast new prosperity for all of our citizens. We will put more money into your pockets and create millions and millions of new jobs. We're going to do it like nobody else. has ever been able to do it.
Former President Donald Trump on the campaign trail today in the key swing state of Pennsylvania. This, of course, as the Democratic National Convention is kicking off here in Chicago, where we're broadcasting to you live here on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Kaylee Lyons alongside Joe Matthew, joined now by our political panel, the signature panel at that, Rick Davis, Stone Court Capital partner, and Jeannie Shanzano, political science professor at Iona University and senior fellow at the Center for the Study of the Presidency and Congress. Great to see you both back here in Chicago. And of course, it was only 4 weeks ago that we were in Milwaukee together. And Rick, you were sitting here talking about how traditionally in many of the campaigns you had worked, the other party just lets the convention happen and decides to take a back seat. Joe Biden, who was still the presumptive Democratic nominee at that point, was not doing that. He was sitting down for a primetime interview with Lester Holt, had other activities planned throughout the week, and of course had COVID. It threw a little bit of a wrench in that. But Donald Trump's not letting the Democrats have their convention either. Is this a good strategy?
Yeah, I think it's got to be his strategy because he really doesn't work that hard as a candidate. So he needs to take every opportunity he can to get out there and campaign. Well, I mean, he's done maybe about 10 events in 3 weeks. That is a leisurely pace for a presidential campaign. And so this is an important week for him because he's also ceded the press ground to Kamala Harris since she announced that she was going to be the nominee. And so he's got to fight to get back in this narrative. And that's not going to be easy for a guy who's used to all the narrative being on him. And so my guess is we're breaking all the rules of politics this year, and this is going to be no exception.
Well, you kind of wonder what he could say to make news right now, Jeannie, and I suspect the Democrats are wondering that too. But this is going to be a pretty tough nut to crack all week, to Rick's point, and that starts tonight with Joe Biden. If you look across the speeches on the week, all the primetime lineups could get pretty big ratings considering the Obamas, the Clintons, Walz, Kamala Harris, and so forth. Are we going to see Donald Trump make news before they're all out of here?
He is going to try. I mean, we all talk about him as the king of free media, right, and that is what he has been until, to Rick's point, Kamala Harris came on the scene, and she has really owned the media coverage and the narrative since she burst on the scene. And so he is struggling to get it back. And, he went to the journalist convention. That didn't go so well. He had the Mar-a-Lago. That didn't go so well, the Bedminster. So he is really out there trying. And I think we're going to see him do that. And, what gets the attention is the more outrageous things he says. And that's what I think we may start to hear is he may be, inclined to say things that are outrageous to garner that attention back, because we do have really big speakers here in Chicago, from Obama to Biden tonight to Clinton, and then, of course, Walz and Harris.
Well, and the Obamas is what raises this question for me. As you talk about how he may say outrageous things, it raises the question of what the appropriate response is from here in Chicago. Michelle Obama on the stage, 2016, when they go low, we go high. Is that still the winning strategy for Democrats, or does everyone need to get a little low?
Yeah, it's been so fascinating because one of the things I think Kamala Harris has introduced to all of us is to sort of just ignore when he tries to get her into these back and forths. So yeah, Michelle Obama said when they go low, we go high. You look at Kamala Harris, she has pretty much said when he goes low, I'm just going to keep going forward with a sort of hope and change message, if you will. And that seems to have really driven Donald Trump, a bit frustrated and crazy, if you will, because he's not used to this. He's used to getting all of the oxygen in the room. So I think what they're going to try to do is simply ignore him if they can.
So what would you do with Donald Trump then if you were trying to get him out there to try to break through all the Democratic noise and news, I guess, this week in Chicago? Is it a headline? Is it a new proposal? Is it something we haven't heard yet? Or just keep him out in front of reporters so he can say Kamala Harris is not?
Yeah, I do think Donald Trump's his worst enemy these days, and the best gift to the Harris campaign, because what he is saying is inappropriate. Even Republicans are begging him to get off of that. I think you saw in the clip we played just now, he's reading off a teleprompter very dryly. You can tell he's batting his eyes saying SOS, SOS. He doesn't like teleprompters. He wants to just wing it. And so, I think that's number one, is let him be the biggest problem. If he does get disciplined enough to strike a message tone, then they're going to have to become more aggressive. And I totally disagree with this notion that somehow Democrats don't know how to campaign negatively. The Obamas were running a very good negative campaign. It's not a bad thing to point out the flaws of your opponent.
Been
I
on
wish
the
he
other
hadn't
side
done
of
it
that.
so much on my side. But the reality is, this has been a different tone than Biden took. Biden kind of ignored Donald Trump, and his attacks to Trump were more personal. And I think the Harris campaign has set a tone that they're going to go after him on the issues because they don't want to concede that. And I think that's fair game.
Well, we're going to have a lot more to follow here with our panel coming up from Chicago as we count down to President Biden's speech tonight. We'll have much more on what to expect from the President of the United States next on Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio.
Here and now, I give you my word. If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I'll be an ally of the light, not the darkness. It's time for us, for we the people, to come together. And make no mistake, united we can and will overcome this season of darkness in America.
President Biden 4 years ago at the Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee, not far from where we are in Chicago. Tonight, Joe Biden set to deliver another speech at the DNC, handing over the reins to the woman he hopes will be his successor. Back with us now, our panel, Rick Davis, Stone Court Capital partner, and Jeannie Shanzano, political science professor at Iona University. Great to have both of you back together here. Jeannie, as we look ahead to the speech tonight from President Biden, there's been a lot of talk about legacy around here, but Anita Dunn, his advisor, tells CNN that this is not legacy time. This is about looking to the future, selling the candidacy of Kamala Harris. Is that what we're actually going to get?
That is. I mean, we keep hearing him describe this speech in one word, and that is win. And as you go up to the Democratic convention, they have inscribed quotes. And the quote they took from Joe Biden is "History is in your hands," which comes from his White House address. And that is really speaking to the fact that this speech is going to be about Democrats winning the presidency and saving the country from another 4 years with Donald Trump, which he thinks is the most important thing he can say tonight.
And then after this, he allows Harris to have the last 3 days is really her convention. He is literally removing himself. He's going on vacation to California. It becomes a question after this week. He still is going to be president for several more months here. Rick, what role can he play in this campaign, knowing we've been sitting here talking about a reinvigorated party that seems to be incredibly relieved that he is not the nominee? So is it helpful for him to be involved beyond this week?
Yeah, I think there's some role he can play. Obviously, he's got to leave enough room for Harris to grow as an individual and a candidate. And yet, older voters really like Joe Biden. I mean, he's one of them, and I don't mean that in any disparaging way. I mean, he connected with over 65-year-old voters in a way that no other Democrat has done before. That's usually the turf of the Republican Party. And if he can continue to communicate to them the value of a Harris presidency, I think he can stop Trump from being able to grow through a more traditional group of voters that Republicans are used to.
You kept a pretty tight leash on speech writing, speech delivering at your convention in 2008. Are you able to do that when it's the president? You had, of course, George W. Bush speaking on the first night. Is that a cooperative situation? Is it a collaboration, or you just get what the president does?
You get what the president does, and he tells you how long he's going to do it. You really have no voice in the matter at all. They wanted to know what we would like him to talk about, and we communicated all kinds of great ideas. I'm not sure if any of them made the speech, but he gave a great speech, and I don't think this is any exception to that. People like President Bush and Obama and Clinton and Joe Biden, they're good at this. They know what to do. This isn't going to be a flub unless he just has a hard time giving the speech himself. And that's a different set of issues that you don't want to be talking about on Tuesday.
Oh, true.
Of course, we've seen him give a speech from the Oval Office recently when he announced his departure from the race several weeks ago, and he made it clear that one of his priorities with his remaining time in office is a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, which seems that it did get one step closer today with Israel agreeing to it. We asked Democratic Congressman Sean Casten of Illinois about the timing of that, and this is what he told us.
Given how long this conflict has persisted, I think if we try to solve it to address short-term U.S. political issues, we're probably not thinking about it the right way. Politically, of course, it would be wonderful to have a solution right now, but I think it's much more important that we have a long-term solution that we can look back on 5, 10 years from now and say, this was a turning point, not just this was something that was politically well-timed.
With that kind of characterization in mind, Jeannie, do you think Biden will take the chance to speak about this tonight, or is he not going to want to declare something done before it really is?
I hope he does not declare this done unless it's actually done. And I couldn't agree more with Representative Casten, because you don't want to jump ahead of this. This is far too important. People's lives are at stake. And I think Joe Biden knows that. So can he mention this is a possibility? Maybe. But to say it's done until Hamas and Israel have agreed on that, I think would be a bridge too far and not recommended by his team, and he knows that.
Well, so then it's on to the protesters, if that's the case, right? Tens of thousands in town for this, Rick. Is this just part of the optics of a convention or something Democrats should worry about?
You know, I think it's going to really hem them in, because if they talk a lot about Israel from the podium, then the Palestinian protesters inside the hall are the ones to worry about, right? Heckling and screaming. And if they don't say anything about this, then the Israeli supporters of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to be upset that they kowtowed to the Palestinian supporters. So they can't win this week on this issue. So probably better leave it off the dais and just hope for the best.
All right, Rick Davis and Jeannie Shanzana with us on this first evening of the convention, and will be with us from Chicago here all week. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you all for joining us on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
That's right. Catch us again tomorrow in Chicago for day 2 of the DNC. We're going to have a lot more coming to you from this great city, and we are making the best of it, Kaylee, as we spent some time at the legendary Kingston Mines and heard some of the best blues players in the country, reminding us of why we're here right now, beyond the politics, of course.
Politics do have something to do with it.
Yes, indeed. I think some politicians might be down at Kingston Mines. Thanks for being with us on Bloomberg TV and radio.